I'd like to get started with introductions. So at this time, my name is Mary Cullinane, board member. Jen Newseeger.
Victoria Jetty.
I think a wave would help.
Sorry.
Victoria Jetty.
Amy McGlashan.
Peter Burrows, superintendent.
Peg Martin.
Chip Malcolm. You're
Kyle Mitchell, student representative.
Peter Conlon.
Aaron Carpenter, student representative.
Mary Gill.
Brittany Gilman, business manager.
Vicki Wells, Director of Student Services.
Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Folks online.
Suzanne Buck.
Oh, sorry.
Lorraine,
Lorraine Morse.
Suzanne,
Suzanne Buck.
Davina,
Davina Dameray.
Jory.
Jory Jacobite.
I can't see that.
I think that's Peter at the bottom.
Oh. Great, we got everyone. Now we'd like to open, as we always do, the opportunity for public comment. I'll turn it over to Peter to manage the attendees, bringing them over into the Zoom meeting so that we can see who is speaking.
Okay, Chris Kramer.
Great. Hi, Chris.
Oops. Was that turned over to me? This is Chris Kramer.
Hi, Chris. Yes.
Hi, great. For some reason, and I don't know if this happens to other folks, it actually cut me out for a second and said rejoining. It took me a minute to realize that's what had happened. I don't know if that'll be a technical thing for other folks, but anyway. So I just wanted to follow up on my comment from the last meeting. I think prior to the last meeting, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm co-chair of Friends of Cornwall School. And we had conducted a survey using just the school directory, so really just school families, regarding consolidation. My co-chair and I this year just wanted to kind of have a sense of really where families were, because we didn't know kind of in the overall how folks were feeling about things right now. And we did try to be, pretty kind of balanced in our presentation. We, listed sort of the reasons for consolidation, at least some of the rationales first, and put that out there as just a one question survey. And I sent you guys before the last meeting the results of that. And even with that presentation, it kind of came out, we got about 85% of families responding, and about 80% were, sort of not in favor. But I think it was about 7% pro, and then we had an uncertain option. A few folks suggested that we follow up on that with some kind of a town survey. We weren't quite ready to go out to the whole town, but just for convenience sake, we went to Front Porch Forum, which is, pretty active in Cornwall, and used just this exact same language, the one question, over Front Porch Forum. And we got about 96 responses, mostly just, and this is from eyeballing it, but mostly not school families, I would say. There were a few overlapping respondents, which we said was allowed, but mostly it looked like not. And there, directionally, it was pretty similar. The numbers weren't quite as weighted, but I think it was about 67%, so about 2/3 not in favor, 27% in favor. So that was a little higher because I think it was like 7 for the school families, but still only 27%. And then there was sort of the leftovers who were uncertain, which was around 7% or so. So I sent you all the results of that via email. So that should be in your board mailboxes. We've got a Cornwall porch conversation coming up on Thursday evening. So, I think there'll just be a lot to try to tackle there. I didn't try to necessarily at the last meeting in my comments kind of draw conclusions. Obviously the results are what they are, but I think the best I can kind of say, and I think we'll have more time to ideally talk it through in the porch conversations, which I think is what they're intended for. But I'd really love to see kind of a collaborative and maybe creative process where we can say, okay, we understand that folks may not all be in the same place on this issue, but can we kind of take each other in good faith and figure out solutions going forward that take account of kind of concerns on all sides. I would love to believe, and maybe I'm being Pollyanna-ish, but that we're strong enough, we're small enough and strong enough as a community that we can respect each other, we can come together and we can say, look, we believe that people on both sides of this issue have valid concerns, and we should be able to put our kind of Vermont ingenuity into a creative solution that can leave us walking away without resentment and actually feeling stronger as a community. And I think we've got, now that we have the consultant's report in, I think that provides a foundation. But I think we have a potential as a community, even with all the other challenges we're dealing with, to take that and build on it and, in good faith, try to create solutions that, that do our best by everyone. So I'm looking forward to that conversation on Thursday. We've got another one in Cornwall scheduled on Thursday. I know there are a bunch of others in other towns. I think Amy made a good comment at the last meeting that encouraging crosstown conversations probably makes a lot of sense. And so that was Amy Mason, and Amy McGlashan noticed in an email to me which I actually didn't realize. So you might want to get the word out a little better. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound like that, but a little more widely that you can actually show up to any of the porch conversations. Probably people will go to their own town, but I think that would be really good if we could get some cross-town conversations going on this. But anyway, I'll stop there. But I mostly just wanted to keep you informed. There were some comments. I haven't had a chance to compile those and send those along, but we'll do that shortly so that you can have those as well.
Thank you. Any other hands? Zoom hands? No more Zoom hands?
No.
And Peter, I think you said we were going to do a roll call too of the attendees.
Yeah, let's bring someone over now, then we can do that afterwards. People are
Great.
still joining.
Perfect.
Hello, were you guys all here?
Hi there.
Steve, you're muted.
Here we go. Now can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. Been having some microphone problems, so just wanted to make sure you can hear me. All right. I just wanted to make a comment, kind of touch on two things. First, I wanted to let you know that I'll be submitting a petition that was hosted on change.org that asks you to put your facilities master plan process on hold during the current public health emergency. This petition is signed by nearly 650 people and asks that the board put the facilities master plan process on hold for the duration of the pandemic due to the facts that we don't know how long this emergency will last, what it will alter related to education, the difficulties it presents in holding public meetings, and so that the board can direct its full attention to the safety of students. So I plan to send the petition to the board chair along with the list of signatories. If you do take the time to look through the petition, In the accompanying signatures, you'll notice that one of the signatories is the same person whose essay is quoted by a board member in a piece that is now posted on the ACSD School Board Updates page. And to be perfectly frank, in all honesty, I think you may likely move ahead quickly regardless of this petition. It's unfortunate for me to say that, but I do believe that. That reality and adversity is not sufficient reason for me not to present this petition to you and pursue a process I believe can be done better. So that concludes the first part of my comment. And I just want to, in the second part, I want to express my frustration with the facilities master plan process. I echo a public comment at a previous board member meeting in saying that I take issue with the board's process to engage the public. The board has listened to public comment. I will give you that. And you have answered questions to a limited extent on your FAQ page. What I have observed is that the board is not fully engaged with the comments you've heard. From my vantage, it appears that this board had an idea a while back. You have listened to concerns on the way, and you have largely continued on the same path you have been on from the start. We are facing a situation that is unprecedented in our modern times. I don't think anyone would argue that. And rather than listening to the messages that could be learned from this unique situation, the board has used the lowest common denominator, fiscal challenges, and moved ahead in the exact same direction you were going before the pandemic. In terms of the facilities master plan, I have seen limited shifts in direction as a result of community input. I've seen one change in direction as the board moved away from a 1 or 2 school model, and much of that change appeared due simply to finances and the optics of certain bond requests. The aspects of the situation that are viewed as helpful to making your points have been keyed upon, and the board is moving ahead with the same goal you had before this. I don't argue fiscal challenges aren't real or important, but they are far from the only thing that needs to be addressed or should be addressed in the management of a school district. I also want to state plainly that I do not believe the board has offered a compelling case and had the necessary discussions for the closure of the schools you've identified in your planning. I haven't seen the honest conversations and discussions and disagreements over such topics. Perhaps they are taking place and I haven't been privy to them. If they are and they simply haven't been in the public eye, that is a whole separate problem. Regardless of that potential, I fail to see how the members of this board can be so wholeheartedly convinced from such an early point with such little visible necessary conversation amongst yourselves that this is the only path forward. Perhaps everyone on this board really does see the situation exactly as the other people you share the board with. But from the time the 6th grade move was voted on till now, I see very few, if any, dissenting opinions. For a group as intelligent as you all are, I find this very hard to believe. That concludes my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Want to do a roll call?
Sure. So, roll call of people who have names of attendees who are attending. Amanda Burnham, Barb Wilson, Brandy Corbett, Chantel Bolduc, Chris Kramer, Eric Guar, Lawrence Ferencine, George, Joanna Doria, Julie Altimos, Julie Berg, Liza Perrin, MCTV, Megan Sears, Melissa Flint, Natalie Kryzo, Shauna Lee, and Steve Cash.
Great, thank you. That ends the public comment. Next on our agenda is the recommendation to approve the minutes of August 24th. Suzanne, thank you for pulling together in not ideal circumstance minutes from a meeting. We appreciate that. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as written? Mary Gill, the motion, and Amy McGlashan, second. Any discussion or comments? Peter?
Just a very small point, but it's probably, since it's an action that we took, it probably should be in there. Anybody can correct my memory, but I think we awarded 2 fuel bids. And it only has the Champlain Valley Fuels for fuel oil. I think we also did Files Brothers for propane.
That's true.
And that should just be reflected as an action taken.
Sorry, I just couldn't hear everything.
Oh, no worries. Victoria?
Yeah, I was not in attendance, yet I'm listed as being in attendance. I will fix that. I know my presence can be felt even when I'm not here, but.
So with the changes of addition of the propane fuel bill being awarded and the change of Victoria not being present, all those in favor of approving the minutes with those additions, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, so moved. Next on the agenda, approve our bills.
2 sets of bills. First one read on August the 31st. And it was under the general fund, and the amount was $290,922.15. Those were read by Victoria and myself. And then today, 9/14, one for payroll related is $777,875.71. And the second is the general fund, $684,634.30. Those are read by Victoria and I also. And I make a motion that we pay the bills. As written.
Second by Victoria, all those in favor, wave your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Great, any opposed? Up and down. Great, so moved. Next up, report of the board, report of the superintendent.
Great. So the first thing, board members, that you saw was the board report, and I think principals did a great job of sharing some of the things that they've been doing in preparing for the start of school. It was a longer ramp up to the start, as you all know. That gave us a lot more time to hone in on some things that we brought in as a result of COVID-19 and this unusual environment. Caitlin mentioned Manage Back and Toddle. These are 2 platforms that we're now using pre-K through 12. And so we spent a lot of time in pre-service really learning those platforms. There's a lot to learn. I think we're still ironing out some of the challenges, and kind of ramping those up, and we'll continue to as we move forward. I think as I read through the principals' comments, and obviously I've been working directly with principals, as they've gotten started, it's really neat to see how they've worked to create a warm environment and to really make it inclusive. And I saw that last week as I visited schools and checked in with people. There was 6 months of waiting and 6 months of building emotion and everything else. And I think when we finally came back together, it was just beautiful to see how important it was for people to make connections again, to be together again. We're not perfect. We don't have everything figured out yet, but I think we were ready in terms of all of our health and safety protocols and those types of things. And I think once people hit the ground running, a lot of that, like what they've been carrying for 6 months, was just kind of like, and we started moving. So was an exciting week. Teachers got to meet for one day with one of their cohorts, and then 2 days with their Thursday, Friday cohort. So today is our now 2 days for each group. Last week on Friday, I shared with the community our action guide, which we drew out of our health and safety guidelines. We're pretty clear, and I think as we look around to see what's happening today, this morning we woke up and found that a middle school over the mountains is closed for a week due to staffing concerns with a couple positive cases. We're really trying to convey to the community that we expect that we will have cases just given how things go. And so it's really, really important that everybody understands how we're going to be dealing with that we're as transparent as we can with COVID case information, obviously protecting privacy and confidentiality at the same time. So the action guide, which some of you may have had a chance to look through, I think is an easier access to some of the really verbose, that 55-page document that most people have a hard time wading through. That really helps people to understand. So if I wake up and I have sniffles and this and that, what do I do? It's helpful to both see what you should do and what the steps that will take in terms of how long you need to stay away, when you can come back, how we're going to respond to positive cases, how we're going to be informing the community about any positive cases that we do have. I wanted just a shout out to all of our staff who have been working really hard, again, through a lot of emotion and a lot of challenge to put things together in a way that I think is really positive and has us focusing on the great things about school and the great things about our community. So it's a great start. There's a lot more to come. I'm working with, I had a meeting on Friday with our regional superintendents, and we're starting to talk about, now that we're going, we talked about a 4 to 6 week window to assess where we are and whether we're ready to bring either a portion of the student body back or more, or phase in. So that's work that we're going to be doing in earnest over the next 3 weeks. Again, looking at our COVID data, looking at our staffing and our ability to staff all of our schools. That is a concern that was across It Brook today. That was the major challenge there, is a number of staff quarantined, so they couldn't hold school physically in person. So that's something obviously we'll have to be watching as well. So a really good start. Happy to answer any questions.
There's a question I've heard, and I think it would be good for our student reps to hear this so they can bring it back to their constituents. I've heard grumblings about the switch to manage back in Toddle. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to why now, timing, why those platforms.
Sure.
And
so this summer, as we were looking at kind of preparing for this year and, not knowing if we're going to spend the year fully remote, if we're going to try to start also going to be remote, felt like we needed to really invest in solid platforms that we can use both this year and build into the future. In work that we did this summer, we have a new tech innovation specialist who is now, he's half-time. So in consultation with him and talking with principals and looking at kind of all the variables, felt like it was a good time to commit to some of these tools that, with the extended period of time we had at the start of school, could help to kind of give us a stronger foundation. It has been, I mentioned that earlier, referenced that earlier. I think we're still kind of figuring out, they're two totally different platforms, first of all. So, I think we're still trying to figure out some of the nuts and bolts in terms of how to make it as both easy as possible to use, and then also how it can be a strong communicative tool. Caitlin, do you have anything you want to add about?
Sure. So both Manage Back and Toddle are designed not by IB, but for IB, by independent companies. And they really, both platforms really reinforce some of the pedagogical infrastructure of what IB is. So for instance, ManageBack, which we've used as a grading platform in the past, actually is a virtual learning platform, is a communication platform. So when a student is assigned an assignment in ManageBack, it's also anchored to the rubrics that we use for scoring. And so all of the sort of things that we're trying to reinforce around proficiency-based teaching and learning are baked into that ManageBack model. So with that one, when we were looking at how do we strengthen our practices with ManageBack, and how do we strengthen our practices with Google Classrooms, that we do both of those things better, it ended up looking like it was actually a smaller leap to just do one of them well, instead of defining new practices around Google Classroom, which is not designed for IB. So we made that move for ManageBack. It's not a perfect system. It's a little clunky. And so thankfully, we've got our tech innovation specialist is also an experienced IB educator who's worked with ManageBack before. So he's a huge asset to us in bringing our teachers along, building their skills on that front. So with Toddle is also, we explored ManageBack for the PYP in years past and decided that it didn't add enough value for the price tag for what we needed it to do at the elementary level across 7 schools. When we were introduced to Toddle this year, also designed for the PYP, but really explicitly for the PYP. So where ManageBack was designed first for the DP and then it sort of expanded down, Toddle was designed first for the PYP, really emphasizes transdisciplinary learning and student agency in a lot of different ways that students can submit their work from home, whether it's taking a video or a sound recording or taking a photo of their work. It's all embedded in this app, which can work on their Chromebook. So the other thing that both of these platforms do is they act as professional collaboration spaces for educators. So they can collaborate, at the elementary level, collaborating across 7 schools has always been a challenge. Now they have this system designed for collaborating in the PYP structure and format. ManageBack does that at the secondary level also. And so over time, that's not our top priority now, but over time, we'll have our whole curriculum within these platforms. If I'm a PYP teacher at Ripton, I share my unit with my PYP colleagues at the grade level teams across all schools, and we can create an assignment, share it with everybody at once, and then, somebody can assign the same thing to their students at Shoreham. So it's a really powerful collaboration tool, Toddle is. So there were a lot of really good reasons to go with these systems. And as Peter said, we had 13 days of pre-service. We're never going to have that kind of time again. So it was an extra layer of stress on all teachers. There's no way of getting around it. It's hard. What we asked them to do was hard, and hard on top of things that were already hard. We did take the pressure off and extend the timeline, so you won't see those platforms fully implemented. Currently, the deadline to fully implement Toddle is October 1, and ManageBack, I think, is November 2. We wanted to just take some of the pressure off and give teachers some time to feel comfortable and feel really solid in what they were doing before they felt like they had to roll it out to students. And we wanted the students to be on board before they roll it out to parents. So you should see more information coming out as our teachers are feeling more solid on those. But I do think that the time that they're investing now is going to pay off for years.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a training for families?
Yeah, so we're working on, I think Mark Monahan is the new tech integration specialist, and he has created, I know he's created some videos for Toddle already. My best guess is he's done them for ManageBack also. I know he's done them for Toddle because we were just talking about how to get them translated into other languages today. So there will be a couple of videos that we push out for people to access when they want to. And then we'll probably also offer some sessions for families in real time over Zoom. But just wanted to, say again, we're waiting until the students are in there so that they can be playing with it with their parents at home and feel a little bit more confident before we roll it out extensively to parents.
Yeah, I think from what I'm hearing that and you guys can speak to this, but, that it's not consistent necessarily across subject areas or across teachers, and so I think it's confusing to know how is an assignment being assigned and where do you look? Some are on Google Classroom still, but also have links, or that's just what I'm hearing. I haven't actually put my hands on it myself, but.
I'd love to hear from the students about it.
Well, specifically in my classes, a lot of my teachers are just coming from having their school website pages, and that's where they have all their own stuff. Then they had to move it to Google Classroom, and now they're having to move to ManageBack. So a lot of them are still in between the first step, but I think they're all trying really hard to get it to ManageBack. And in DP, I think they're all doing well. And I don't know about your classes, but I haven't had much of a problem knowing where to do my assignments. And if I did, I think it's important just to communicate with each individual teacher. But it might be different for lower grades who haven't had the experience that me and Kyle might have.
Kyle, you have anything to add?
I do, yeah. Thank you, Caitlin. So yes, I think it's been an interesting tool. I think briefly on myself as a student, it's been fine. I've been able to find my classes, but it's certainly a challenge to other students. I've heard from my peers, and I think, you know, as kind of said, I think as we learn it together, I think as the students learn it, as the families learn it, as the teachers learn it, so we can more so support the students and the parents, is obviously ideal. And I think it's a great tool, and I would agree. I think from a student standpoint that it is useful. I find it useful, but I think there definitely needs to be clear communication going forward and to the students and the families. And I agree. I think it's challenging. I think as we're settling in this new times to have all this overload of information, but I think the students that are struggling with it, and the students that do know it. So I think it's important that to collaborate, right, with students and teachers to understand that going forward.
Thank you.
Just a comment, you know, back in my medical days, when they introduced the medical record, basically online, anybody that was involved with medicine and you learned things, what we didn't feel that we got from people that were foisting on us, so to speak, was hearing our feedback and hearing our frustrations and trying to resolve them in whatever way is possible. And it was a really, really hard time. It was like saying, from this time on, you can't write anything in the chart. You have to speak Chinese. Now, I know you don't know Chinese, but you're going to learn it from this day forward. So I just plead with everybody, I guess, from every side, including parents and including everybody else, to be really patient. Frustrated, we're going to be, for sure. But patience is really important because otherwise, I remember one of my colleagues in the process, we were given computers to work this on. He got so frustrated one day, he threw it against the wall. $1,500 went off in one spot. But I mean, he wasn't that kind of a person. But that's how much you can get riled up when you are trying to do your job, whatever way it is, whether it's a student, faculty, or anybody else. So I think this is really important to keep that in mind and to hear whoever it is that's hearing the process, the complaints, frustrations that they live. I'm not talking just to you, Caitlin, but I meant that you presented the reasons for using it, to be able to sort of comprehend and process it in a way that all of us that were frustrated learning a new tool.
Yeah. Well, that does relate to the idea that some things are mixed. Some teachers are still using the Google Classroom. We were listening to that feedback and spent much of a weekend hearing and responding to feedback. And so thus extended the timeline. And so things will be a little bit messy longer than we wanted them to be, but it buys everybody time to learn the skills before they're forced to press play on something that they feel really unsure about.
That's the patience part.
And it was, yes, yeah, so do be patient, especially with teachers who are really learning so much right now. And some of the pausing on just slowing down on the implementation of management was to give teachers the sort of bandwidth to think about their teaching and their students and not worry too much about getting the tech all right on day one. So do expect things to be a little bit messy. If you hear frustrations, don't hesitate to send them my way, because all of those conversations about how do we provide more support and what do we need to tweak and modify? What do we need to do to streamline some of the practices so that it's more coherent over time? We'll just keep learning our way through it.
And I apologize if I should have read this someplace, but has that extension been communicated to the parents?
What? Oh, the implementation extension? I don't know that it has. I don't think that we ever communicated a start date.
Yeah, I don't think they have
You might not have to put language to it that way, but helping parents understand why it seems still messy and that you are reacting to and being supportive of the challenges of implementation, I think could alleviate some of the.
Part of that too is if parents talk to other parents in different districts and different school systems, all right, so they're gonna have comparisons and, oh, my kid is doing great. Well, it may not be as innovative as you're trying to be with this. And they're not IB, and they're not, there's lots of other variations. So I don't know how you defend and bring that out there, but it's important, because I do hear that.
Everybody's done a lot, and I wish we had a better way to show our appreciation, and maybe we can talk about ways at some point. But at this point, I know there's only a few teachers online. Maybe we can offer a round of applause that maybe you can show them after for all of their hard work. If everybody's willing to give them a little round of applause and our appreciation.
Yeah.
We're all smiling under.
Any other comments or questions on that one?
I just want to add that I really appreciated having some student voice in this conversation. That was so helpful. Thank you, Rose.
That's right. That's right. Financial update, Brittany.
Okay, so I guess it's semi-financial. I just wanted to start with a positive update. I feel like I basically get to bring positive news like once or twice a year. So like it's always a joy for me. So you probably saw, I know at our last meeting I said, oh, there's no way the USDA is going to continue this free lunch funding. And I was wrong, and it's one of the times I like to be wrong. So the USDA did extend that. You probably saw that in the communication. So families will be able to access meals through December. We're still encouraging folks to get their free and reduced applications in so that there isn't a lapse when that does end. So that's really positive and definitely makes things easier for us logistically, and also is a great benefit for families. And it includes like students who are 2 or 3 who don't attend our program, so maybe we can sign up and pick food up. So that's great. In terms of a financial update, next meeting I'll have,
Can I just ask a quick question on the food?
Yeah.
So if you have a 2 or 3-year-old, but you don't necessarily have a kid in school, how would you know?
We have posted on our Facebook and the website. We did send it out in our newsletter, and we did share with parent organizations. So also the child care program in Johnson know about it because they have programs in our building. At the next meeting in September, I'll have sort of our more formal year-end financial report. It'll be unaudited. Our audit is coming up in October, but we should have a good idea of where we'll be ending. It's been really tricky this year because number one, the new software is our first year in the new software, and it's not ideal, but we're getting through it. And then also, there's some uncertainty about which costs from FY20 will be reimbursed through the CRF funds and how those should be booked. Typically, it's a little like accounting, I guess, but typically if we're expecting that money to come, we book it as revenue. So it's not based on when the cash comes, it's based on when the money's been committed to us. So trying to work with the state and figure out how much we think that might be, if we should book any FY20, and that affects our bottom line. So I fully expect to end the year with a positive fund balance. We did have some additional costs through June, but we also had some savings because we were really pretty shut down. There was, no overtime, there were no spring sports. We got some discounts or amendments on many of our contracts, like transportation and other things that we're using on a reduced basis. The real costs came after June 30, as we prepared to ramp up to school. So I just wrote a grant application for the CRF funds. There are now sort of 3 pools of money that we're playing with and sort of trying to figure out. So the first is FEMA, and we're not exactly sure. The state isn't sure if FEMA money is going to come through or not. There's still some question about whether school districts would be eligible for FEMA, and that's the most restrictive pot of money, so it covers a much smaller number of things. So far, we've just been asked to submit a request to be considered for FEMA, but there's no grant application or anything open. But if we do get money allocated there, that would be the first place that we would go for reimbursement. And the second place is CRF funds. We had a VASBO business managers meeting on Friday. Things are moving so quickly that the information that I have is probably already outdated. But the information that we got on Friday was that the grant applications that had been received was already more than what had been allocated for CRF funds. However, I know the legislature was working on getting more allocated to that. It's also a little bit tricky because the state is asking us, the AOE is asking us to submit requests for reimbursement for both costs that were above and beyond our budget and costs that are really repurposed. And the reason for that is that those repurposed costs would be withheld from our FY21 Ed Fund payments to help with the deficit in the Ed Fund.
Can you give an example of like a repurposed cost?
Yeah, so, well, an easy example would be we used our transportation for delivering meals, but we would have had that cost anyway. Teacher planning time for remote learning, we would have had to pay teachers, but we use their time to do planning for remote learning rather than in-person instruction. But there's been a general lack of consensus or guidance about how to determine what those costs are. We also have concerns as business managers that if there's not enough money to even fund the requests that are above and beyond our budget and what we anticipate will be through December 31st, we don't really want to ask for unbudgeted costs because we want to get the reimbursement for the things that were really above and beyond. But if we don't ask for the things that were repurposed, then that doesn't fill the hole in the Ed Fund, and that fits us in FY22. So we're in this big catch-22, and we're working as business managers together trying to figure that out, and also really hoping for more direction from the AOE. From our perspective, from FY20, we're going to end the year in a positive place. I am concerned about FY21. I do believe, and then the next pot is ESSER funds, which we didn't talk about. That grant application isn't due until April, and everyone I know is waiting to figure out how the rest of the chips fall, to figure out what to ask for and not, because that's sort of your place of last resort. It's least restrictive. So it's pretty difficult to figure out, what to ask for. I am concerned about FY21. I do believe that we will have more costs than we are able to get reimbursed for. And we're open. So we're having most of the, if not all of the costs that we would have under normal circumstances. And then much, much more. Things like hand sanitizer, you don't think it's expensive. When you have to order 20 gallons at a time, it gets pretty pricey. So I definitely have concerns about FY21 and do have concerns about the potential of running a deficit.
That said, we're trying to work really closely with the AOE to make sure that we're maximizing the funds that we can get for reimbursement and really keeping track of things that could even maybe remotely be related to COVID-19. And they may get denied, but at least we'll have a good sense of what it costs.
And the funds that you're applying for now, is there any indication as to whether or not they'll be available again in the next fiscal year, or they have an end?
So they have an end
Recent
date.
dates.
So the CRF funds are only for costs incurred through December 31st. It actually doesn't even take us through the full year. The ESSER money, which is the least restricted, is available through this fiscal year. But it would take an additional authorization from the federal government in order to have any of these be reaffirmed. So far, there's no indication of that, but I think we're too early in the process to know what that would look like.
But I will just add on to it that in the budget that's currently going through the legislative process, there, I think it's another 30 million, if not more, dollars for all of the costs that we are anticipating between now and the end of December. So the intention of the legislature anyway is that no school district should have to incur any costs above and beyond normal operating.
Can I ask one more question? Can you speak a little bit to the additional cost for providing Chromebooks to every student and whether or not that's considered above and beyond? Or I know that there had been talk in the district to do that eventually anyway, sort of how's that?
Yeah, it's probably not going to end up being considered above and beyond, because the way that the state is looking at it is how much money do you have in your budget? So if we have $100,000 in our budget for technology supplies and we spent $200,000, then it's the delta. So, I mean, we're able to basically use most of our normal replacement cycle.
Yeah, we actually had all these devices. We didn't have to buy anything
Oh, really?
to do this.
We did buy some tablets, some other things, right? Like
We've got a lot of
tablets
peripheral
and-
type things that we wouldn't normally get. Webcams, microphones, things like that. But the Chromebooks were already in the budget for things that we would have been buying on a regular cycle anyway. We were more or less up to the equivalent of having one per student.
Yeah.
So it was really just kind of inventorying them all, going through which ones were worthy of, actually assigning individually, because some of them were, there's a few that were getting in the 5-year-old range. We really want to give some kids those and some kids brand new ones. But overall, we pretty much had all the devices that we needed.
Oh, that's great.
So probably the biggest expense is going to be PPE and cleaning and disinfecting supplies. That's been really substantial. I mean, the infrared thermometers are anywhere from $70 to $150 each. So that it adds up really quickly. And as I said, the tricky thing is, if we have $5,000 in our nurse supplies budget, we spent all of that on COVID-19 and beyond, they're still going to assume or call that original $5,000 repurposed, but then we don't have it to use for things that we normally would. So, I mean, I definitely understand. I understand their rationale, but it present a challenge.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that this is just going to kind of ebb and flow probably throughout the year, that we're going to get little pieces of information and then we'll kind of walk it back and walk it forward. So it's going to be with us, this topic, and trying to figure out exactly where we stand is going to be a long-term conversation.
Yeah, I'm trying to find consistency in talking with other business managers. Some asked for double what we asked for, some asked for half. Like it just, there's a lot of different methods that people have to try and figure out. First being asked to predict what we think we're going to spend, then trying to figure out, what things from FY20 would be eligible. So I think it's going to take a little bit for us to sort of tighten it up as a group.
The next topic is a board topic.
That is a board topic.
Yeah, it got somehow placed up above. I'm happy to introduce Victoria.
Oh, I don't have it in front of me. Well, what's the next?
The next topic is the facilities committee update. So we can go to report of the board then. That's great. Why don't we go to report of the board? And why don't we start with the policy stuff and then we'll finish up with the facilities. Yeah.
Sounds good. So we're hoping to adopt 3 policies tonight. One is the, I don't have my notes in front of me either.
Hoping to adopt 2.
2.
Amend 1.
Oh, amend one,
adopt
okay. Okay. So the first is the electronic communication between students and staff.
Yep, between employees and students.
So that's to be adopted.
And then equity.
Oh, equity, the equity policy.
And
And then transportation was amended. So the amending, Jen had said there was some, she thought there was a way for somebody to misinterpret whether students who were tuition would be eligible for transportation. And so we just changed it to say entitled students, meaning anybody who was entitled to come to our schools would qualify for transportation if the superintendent put that in his plan. So it was a minor amendment, but just to include everybody who's going to be coming to school.
Great, so why don't we vote on that one first?
Vote on transportation.
So a
Are you
motion,
gonna, after you get a motion, a second, way have discussion?
You should.
yep, so a motion to approve the amended Addison Central School District transportation policy as described in the attachment.
But we are not adopting it tonight.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Right.
Just wanted, I don't know if we ever usually vote on the amendment.
Not adopting, only amending. Great. So then
These
we don't
3
have to
were
vote on it.
warned though.
They were warned.
They were warned
Okay,
to,
well,
to be able to
I'm
amend
fine
and
to
adopt.
adopt it as amended. That wasn't the language. that we-
Okay, so we're voting to adopt as amended.
Okay.
Great.
That's the perfect.
Perfect. So a motion to adopt as amended the ACSD transportation policy as stated in the attached document.
So moved. Second.
Second by Mary. Discussion. None? All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, so moved. Next, Mayor, adopt on the policy of electronic communication between employees and students.
As is, I'll put it on, I'll move it.
There's any.
Any,
This is the same as the one that you presented the last.
right, exactly. No changes? No changes.
So a motion to adopt the Addison Central School District electronic communication policy between employees and students as stated in the attached document. Motion by Mary, second by Peg. All those in favor?
I'd like discussion. I'm
Oh, I'm sorry,
gonna tell you
discussion.
why I'm
Yep.
gonna vote against it. I still don't agree with the way the communication between an employee and a student between the hours of 10 PM and 6 PM is prohibited. So I think that's not clear and I'm gonna vote against it. I'm sorry. I brought it up 3 times.
I'm sorry, who seconded that motion?
Dan would,
Peg did.
Peg
Peg.
seconded it.
Okay, thank you.
Jen, where is that statement?
It's
Number
number
9.
9 on page 3, I think.
Yeah.
I still think it's misleading and unfair. But other people aren't seeing it that way, and you're welcome to vote the way you want. I'm just explaining why I'm gonna vote against it.
Your concern is that it sounds like it prohibits a student from submitting an email, which is,
Yep, communicating with the teacher, and that they're basically gonna be punished in the way that some of the things above would be punished. It could be interpreted that way, and that the student could be punished, and I don't think it's right. I get the reasoning behind it, I don't agree with the way it's worded.
Can you read it? Doesn't it say they can email, but they just
Nope.
don't expect?
No, it says.
No,
No,
that's,
it's
that's
fine.
somebody's interpretation of it, but that's not the way it's written.
I think the idea is that when you say between an employee and a student, it means it's a one-way street.
It's a one-way street.
Yeah, and that's the purpose, right? It's meant to prohibit an employee from communicating with a student.
After 10 o'clock.
A back and forth
10 o'clock.
communication,
Is that the purpose of it?
back and forth.
Yeah, it's a
No.
back
Yeah.
and forth, yeah.
The
It's
back and
not-
forth.
It's not meant to say you can't email, at any time. Right.
I thought the intent was to ensure that there's a policy that does not set an expectation that if the student emails the teacher at 11 o'clock at night, the teacher is required to respond.
Right.
Right.
I think that's the intention, that's not how
Yeah,
I'm reading number
gotcha.
9.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
And is that the intention?
That's the intention, is that there's,
They can communicate, but there's not the
An exchange.
expectation that there's going to be a response.
No, but that's more, I honestly read that differently because
Totally, and I get that, I'm
The-
just saying what I was.
the expectation of a teacher to respond to a student is separate from this policy is putting parameters around what's acceptable in terms of access to employee to student. So it's less, it's not, I don't read it as, you shouldn't expect a response after 10 o'clock.
That's a much different sentence,
That's
though.
That's a totally, yeah, well, and I think if we're having this debate then we need a little more work on the policy.
Unless I'm the only person that's reading that way, I mean, I feel like I'm reading it much differently than your intentions are.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other parents or students or administrators at a school who says a teacher says you emailed me at 11 o'clock at night, that's violating policy, blah, 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 number 9, and that student gets in trouble. Maybe not, but I think if we're setting policies, we should be really clear. And if this intention is, if a student emails a teacher between the hours of 10 and 6, and you may not expect a response until after 6 in the morning, that's
So
much different.
that would help clarify by putting that extra piece in there.
I think it needs to be completely rewritten, if that's your intention, in my opinion. And if everybody else agrees, you can vote for it and go right ahead.
I think it came directly from the.
It did.
It's a model policy.
It was a model policy.
And what is the intention? What's the intention of this, of number 9? Or the behavior that we're trying to?
Can you read it? Yep.
I take it, I personally take this, and I mean, I've always seen it the same way, that communications between an employee and a student is a back and forth between a teacher and student late at night. There's a rationale behind that, there's case history behind that leads to things that we want to avoid. So that's how I read this, and I think what Jen is saying is emailing, which is kind of not really a communication back and forth, but could be considered communication. Someone could construe this as, well, I emailed the teacher at 11 o'clock and the teacher was up late, couldn't sleep, and sent something back. Was that a communication back and forth?
That would be a yes,
That would
right?
be, yeah.
Yes, and it would be violate the
It would be
policy.
violating the policy.
Right.
See, and I thought your concern was, oh, students have my homework's due, it's 10:30, I send it in. Great, I don't have to do anything with that as a teacher, you're free to send it in because it was due by whatever. And that kid shouldn't get in trouble for that.
Right,
Right.
my concern's both.
Gotcha.
I think I can communicate to you without you responding to me personally. But then if you're saying that it's compounded by the fact that somebody does respond and they're violating the policy, it just seems to me that the policy's flawed, whether it was prescribed by the AOE or somebody else or not. Maybe it has been, and maybe like Peter is saying, he knows reasons why this would be. It's clear in his mind.
Right.
And he's always a superintendent, and a case goes to him, he'll know what he means by it. To me, it seems like I'm not a lawyer, it just seems like we're looking for trouble to have something out in the open like that to me doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right that we're putting a communication without providing some reasoning or expectations of where this is coming from and what falls into that category.
And my read is the same as Peter's, that a communication is a back and forth.
And so just to be clear, the example that you provided, which was somebody sends in an assignment and at 10:30 the teacher responds to it, that would in fact be a violation of the policy.
But, so this is Suzanne. So I was speaking, I don't know if you can hear me, but I was speaking with a teacher today and we were doing a transition meeting and the teacher said that they put on their emails and their phones that if something comes in after 10 and before 6, that they will respond to it the next morning. So would that then be considered a communication, just saying, I'm not responding, you know?
No. It seems to me that we can both make this clear and accomplish what we want. There's probably no harm in waiting 2 weeks until our next
We
meeting.
could clarify.
We could override,
If there's any question, I agree. We should clarify.
Okay. I would think the other thing is there is case law involved. It might be a
That's right.
smart thing to footnote it just for the person who is gotten picky. It's not most people, but if this is based on case law, there must have been a big flare up somewhere.
Where would we get that from? Where would we get that case law?
Probably Department of Education.
This is a model policy that came from the BSBA.
It did.
You guys
Yeah.
sent for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great.
And this
We're
was
gonna-
created by the BSBA, BSA. They put together a committee. They were charged
Right.
with creating this. And then they went and created this model policy together and pushed it out to districts. So they did the review. They probably did a national review of policies. They looked at Vermont statute, et cetera, and then came up with this.
Although they have messed up.
It's true.
I think it's time. We'll present a clarification.
Yeah.
We can all do.
A couple of sentences to clear it up.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so that one
You
we're
said,
gonna
gotta handle it.
come back.
Mary.
Yeah. Say again.
Betty is-
Oh, I'm sorry. Betty?
Yeah, this might be minor, but does when you say I think it's when you say computer mediated communication, is it just like in the instance of a cell phone, like texting, is that also included in this? Or is it,
Any electronic communication.
okay, but in your definition, electronic communication is any computer mediated communication. The way I understand computer mediated communication is, just.
It does clarify a little in the last sentence.
Right.
I hear you. But it does clarify a bit with examples.
It's a little confusing.
You could argue that the back end of all this communication is our very large computers making it happen. And how they get mediated into our hands will look different in the next 12 years.
Policy for the
And
new
it's not how
world,
we
it gets
typically
harder and
provide.
harder.
There is a big computer in the sky.
I knew we'd get here eventually. I'm just wearing them off.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're gonna do a little work on.
All right.
So wait a minute, guys, we have a motion that's been moved and seconded on the table, so if you want,
They can withdraw.
We'll withdraw.
Yeah, have withdrawn their motions. So do we need to do a motion to move it to the next week?
We just not take any action on it.
No, action. Okay, great. Next policy, equity policy.
Okay, again, the equity policy is the policy that was the model policy from BSBA. So we're not changes to that either. We didn't make any changes.
But it's clearly something to be built upon.
Right.
It is really not
Yeah.
a policy in and of itself. It is a sort of a statement of intent
Right,
rather
yeah.
than anything else. And it seems to me that it is very critical, very important for this board, this school district, to put some work into what an equity policy should look like on the part of the school. And also to acknowledge and build on the work that was done with earlier groups who worked on the issue.
Right. And also with the understanding of Peter's desire to do a strategic plan around equity in general, so this is just the.
And the last part of the policy also speaks to that.
Yeah.
With all that's going on right now, I know this is something that's important with your stress level and central office stress level and teacher stress level. Does voting this in today put more stress on everybody's brave time and nerves?
No, I
There's no
think
timeline on this.
I see this as really supportive of our goals and mission, and you know, the figuring out the cadence of the strategic planning process, like how to pace that. I mean, there's a reason why I haven't done a big reveal yet, and
Right.
waiting for us to get moving and start to get our feet under us first. So I'm certainly watching that and will, you know, make the space as the capacity is there. So.
In our discussions around changes in the school system, obviously this question comes up a lot.
Right.
Define equity. And, it's obviously you can't define it in 2 words. You have to qualify with lots of verbiage to some degree because that's what it entails.
Right.
So to your point, Peg, that means that you keep sort of tweaking it a little bit as the world changes.
Right.
Okay, so can we have a motion to approve as the Central School District equity policy as described in the attachment?
First.
Motion by Mayor, second by I mean, I think the need of this policy, right, is the implementation component
Right,
and
yes.
laddering
Yes.
and mapping back the work that the district is doing and continues to do to them. So I think that mapping is really the excitement around this policy, not just the policy itself.
Right.
And having something we can now point to, when people say,
Yeah.
what do you mean by equity? Well, we have a policy that pretty well spells it out. That's great.
Great, all those in favor, say aye.
Could I ask a question?
Yep, sorry, your picture's a little dark, so it's hard to see your waving your hand, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would like a clarification. There's two different places where it talks about in the implementation. The first one says to provide every student with equitable access to high quality and culturally relevant instruction. And then down later, it mentions providing continuous professional development for delivery of quality, culturally relevant instruction. I just like a little clarification on what that means, especially the part about providing every student with culturally relevant instruction. I'm not, it's confusing to me. It's exactly what that would look like.
Responsive is the word, actually.
Well, in my mind, I tied those two things together, that the previous definition of culturally responsive practices, the beliefs, methods, and practices that support and empower all students intellectually, socially, and emotionally by leveraging students' lived experiences. So it's those lived experiences that are culturally relevant to ensure learning. So I took that bucket of lived experiences and applied it to cultural. And I mean, I'm assuming that's what I'm doing.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah. Doesn't that sort of reflect, just like the cases against the SATs or whatever, that they weren't culturally relevant to certain groups? Or they were
That's
biased,
why-
or they were biased against certain groups because of that lived
Experience,
experience.
exactly. Lorraine, does that address your question?
Not really. I mean, I guess, I mean, I'm, the first thing I thought of, I mean, we don't have as diverse a population as some areas. And I was thinking about Winooski, for example, where there's a myriad of different groups up there. And so culturally relevant instruction to one student might be entirely different than to another student. So to me, I'm just not sure what that means, how that would look, providing every student with culturally relevant instruction. What does that mean? I mean, I know we're trying to differentiate learning, but I'm not sure what that looks like. I mean, in my mind.
Peter, could you or Caitlin or put some example to that?
Yeah, I mean, Lorraine, I think the term culture relevant is very broad. It doesn't mean in the classic sense of a culture. I think it's a lot deeper than that. When I think about culturally relevant practices, I think a lot of this is about understanding ourselves. We opened the year in my address to educators talking about anti-racism and white privilege. And I think a big part of being culture relevant is being aware of who we are and our biases, our implicit biases that we carry. So I think when you think about the term culture relevant, a lot of this is about understanding who we are and how we promulgate our own views of the world that sometimes cannot make space for other people and their lived realities.
Okay. All right, that sounds a little more. Thank you, Peter, for clarifying that.
Yep.
Any other discussion on this? All those in favor, wave your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, so moved. Great. At this time, next on the agenda is other.
You gonna go back to this?
Oh, no, you're right. Oh, you almost. Yeah. Victoria,
I was just gonna go with it.
Yeah, you were gonna
go. We're getting home by 8:00. So the facilities, committee hasn't met since last meeting, but don't panic. Work is still ongoing. We're gonna hear next meeting, our next facilities committee meeting is on the 23rd at 7:00 in the evening. And we are gonna hear from Vicki and Caitlin on the design team work. They're gonna speak to sort of as we talk about the facilities master plan and creating school communities that are more diverse and classrooms that are slightly larger and potentially more diverse as well. What are we doing to our structures to ensure that we're able to deliver services to all kids? So Caitlin will be speaking about the general education, and Vicki will be speaking about student services.
And just on top of that, I think it's, we've heard a lot of feedback from the community in the public comments and the Q&As and the FAQs and the outreach and all the work that the communication team has done as to where is the education component and conversation around this. And the design teams, I think, have been doing an amazing amount of work to get to a point now where we're able to bring those two things together. So it's going to be super important as we take the next steps in this thinking to now highlight those two elements.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that it is just highlighting it now. Caitlin has been on what was the planning and engagement committee since the beginning of this whole process. And so it's not like we're just bringing her in now to ask, how this should look.
I don't want anyone to think that that's what I am.
No, and I wasn't saying that you were doing that. The community might not be as aware of that, and we, the highlight got placed on the facilities matching the educational needs, but the educational needs was at the forefront of this entire process for the first year before we even engaged with the steering committee, the public steering committee. Caitlin was on our committee that entire year as we came up with what's important, what do we need in each of our schools, and then stayed through with us that whole next year as we heard from the community and talked about things. So I appreciate you saying that, and also just to reiterate that it has been an ongoing conversation since day one of this process.
I think it's actually a really good point, is that the facilities master plan, I think we're finding, is highlighting a lot of work that is ongoing in the district anyway. And so, for example, I'll talk a little bit more later about, we had our first porch conversation, and there were questions about how the facility master plan is starting to look like it's not just planning about facilities, but it's planning about staffing. And was that one of the intentions of the facilities master plan? And I think that at the outset, that's not necessarily what you think of, but the work was ongoing as to how are we staffing our schools to best serve our students. And then it's coinciding with the facilities master plan. And so, and consolidating schools will make some of that delivery easier because there'll be fewer locations. But a lot of the work that's now being highlighted because of the facilities master plan is work that the district is moving towards anyway. So I think that's a good point. One of the other things we've been looking at is sort of the table of contents to the final product of the facilities master plan. And one of the things that we've spoken about is how we really wanted to emphasize the educational benefits, and that a lot of what's been focused on so far has been just facilities and buildings and what we need to do to them in order to get them to be able to welcome students. But we're going to really focus on, in the first part of the plan, on the educational benefits. And that's sort of where we're turning to in this next phase that will begin to be highlighted at the next meeting.
And just to clarify, the facilities master plan, the actual plan, is not a product of Truex Collins, correct? It's a product of this board and the school district and the administration. Great. Which I think is also something that has gotten lost a little bit in the dialogue, that this report is just a product of the Truex Collins, what they have produced. And this plan is an effort of the district and the school board. And that will be what
The
is
piece
written.
that Truex has been integral in is the elementary school study, which is certainly a very important part of the facilities master plan. But the plan in total will be a K-12 plan and will be a product of this board and the administration.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up, and I think it got convoluted at one of the board conversations. I think even in one of the public comments mentioned that the facilities master plan states X, Y, Z, and maybe we need to be clearer that the facilities master plan has not been written yet, nor has it been published, nor has it been voted on. So I think what people are seeing is the Truex Collins recommendation on the elementary school study, which was publicized in the Addison Independent, but that's not the facilities master plan. And that has not been voted on or approved by
Already.
I mean, what was advertised was not voted on by the board, but the master plan is what we will ultimately.
Right, the elementary school study that the public has seen and you all have seen is a modeling exercise, really.
Right.
By Truex. Peter and Mary, please jump in if I'm missing anything. What else? We had our first porch conversation in Middlebury, which I think was a really productive conversation, and I think was helpful to really put a sort of faces to the board. I think that going forward, we're going to do a lot of these, and one of the biggest benefits is going to be that we are not just this sort of amorphous big brother organization or whatever that's sort of working in the background, but that we're sitting here on a porch having a conversation. I think the whole the vibe was good, and we had a really productive conversation. Some of the things that we were able to clarify, some of the questions that came from the public we were able to clarify again that the modeling that Truex did early on, that for sort of numbers reasons, they have put whole schools into other whole schools. We were able to clarify that that is not at all our intention, and that our intention is to create school communities that are as diverse as we can get them in this district by redrawing boundaries. We talked about how schools are funded. I guess a question that I had heard before and then was asked at the meeting was about, have we looked at using our buildings in a totally different way, like grouping cohorts, so having a K through 2 building and having a 3 through 5 building. And I think that's a sort of a model that a lot of people have thought of. If we're looking at equity, isn't that the most equitable way of doing it, is by putting an entire grade cohort in the same place? And we had talked about that at one point with David and Peter and Brittany, and our average cohort is 120 or 25 students, and we don't have buildings that could house more than just like a first grade or something. And so pedagogically, it just doesn't make sense to have students transitioning and then transitioning again and then transitioning again, transitioning again. But I think people were really interested to hear, oh, they have talked about it, they have thought of that, and those are actually really compelling reasons as to why it doesn't work, because it seems in my head that it does make sense, especially if we're leading with an equity lens. And then we talked a lot about how the board and the administration feels that we need to continue planning, and how really the time between when we get all our numbers from the state and when we have to have our final budget ready is 30 days. And if we were to leave this conversation and not continue planning for all different eventualities, we would be really backing ourselves into a corner. If on that day we're told, we have an unexpected cut or whatever, and then we have 30 days to figure out how to do it. So there was a lot of back and forth about that sort of thing. Am I missing any topics?
No, it was the one topic, we chatted about what we were asking of our educators, of our administrators, of the staff in today's environment throughout the country is unprecedented. I can't imagine why someone would actually choose going into education as a career. And yet, what everyone from the superintendent on down is stepping up to do is remarkable and so greatly, greatly appreciated by not just parents, but by the community at large. And one of our greatest challenges is, number one, how do we continue to share that appreciation, have that appreciation be felt by people so that it can lift them up and make them make a decision to go to work the next day. And then
how can we ensure that we continue to find ways to provide appropriate resources so they can do the work that they want to do? And that's really what's motivating this effort. And I think that dialogue was healthy, and there was a couple educators at the board's conversation who, they're worried because they're seeing their colleagues making decisions not to go to school the next day. And it's understandable, so which is why this work is so important that we continue. And I thought that was a very healthy dialogue in the conversation.
Our next porch conversation is on Thursday in Cornwall. Which I look forward to. Another thing that I didn't bring to pass out because I haven't passed it in front of the facilities committee yet, but we've been working on sort of a more, last time we spoke about the general calendar for the facilities master plan, having sort of a rough draft by Christmas and then some things that be approved by town meeting day. We've been working on sort of the nitty gritty of breaking up, the parts of the facility master plan and when we think we can have the work done that I'll share with you all next time. Peter, is there anything else that I'm?
No, I mean, I think you've covered it. There's a lot happening right now. As Victoria mentioned, we're working on bringing together, I think we've touched on a lot of the pieces. We're in year 4 right now in this process, which is, we've covered a lot of ground and I think I've talked about different aspects of kind of educational opportunity, some of the challenges. So we're gonna really point in time as this starts to become more distilled. I think we're in a place to be able to crystallize some of that a little bit more. So the next meeting on the 23rd, the facilities committee meeting, I think will be an important meeting to really, as I said, start to bring some of this together to provide some of the clarity around both that educational picture. We're continuing to, we're starting to enter the budget season now. One of the things we've talked about, and the board, I think, presented a few years ago when the board first came out to start talking about the master planning process, was looking at our budget and where we were headed, and talking about status quo and challenging status quo, partly because we saw at that point the rise of the excess spending threshold, and we saw where we were headed with our budget, and those lines we knew we were headed towards those lines connecting together, and we believe this year they will be, and we may be over that excess spending threshold. So that's something that also, just in thinking about kind of the financial, how does the financial reality that we face right now impact our planning and our ability to continue to provide resources for students. That is also a big piece of this, that we had our presentation last winter in the auditorium and presented some of that kind of long range 5-year window. I think it would be helpful for us to also kind of come back to that. And that's kind of, as I think about what has happened over the last 3 years, in looking at all of the different pieces of this, I think we've moved in a lot of different directions. We've covered a lot of ground. Now we're kind of like wrapping our arms around all of it, 3 years of it, and we're bringing it together.
Any questions?
I just want to clarify, isn't there a porch meeting on Wednesday?
You have gotten an email that we are moving that date.
Oh, no.
Because since that's the second Middlebury one and
Yeah.
it's so close to the other, and there are only 4 of you registered, so
Okay.
I
Didn't see that.
and so
Okay.
that'll get
Thank you.
rescheduled for after.
And a shout
And
out to Amy and the committee, Jen and Betty, you guys did an amazing job of kicking this off and making it so that folks can sign up and
Get lots of
First-
signups, it's great.
yeah, the first one was great. There was a number of people there, everyone was socially distanced, it was outside, got a little chilly.
Don't say that, because then people are not gonna wanna do any in October. Sleeping bags, everywhere.
Closed couches,
Yeah,
maybe
wear
a blanket for your lap, something for your head.
Yeah, just remember the soccer game days.
It was my fault.
Football goes through November normally, right?
Right.
Exactly.
We're used to this.
Yeah, exactly.
I will definitely wear my wool socks next time.
Thursday's gonna be chilly.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Great.
And there were, and just two questions, so, and there were some people from other towns,
Yeah.
but mostly Middlebury.
There was some people, I think it was like 70-30 maybe.
Okay. And because of that, was there a little bit of exchange on Middlebury point of view and small town of?
I mean, there
surrounding
was
Middlebury?
definitely a small town point of view that was shared. I don't, like, and there was definitely Middlebury point of view that was heard by small town point of view, and there was small town point of view heard by Middlebury. But everything, the discourse was fine.
Yeah.
Asked us rather than talking.
Yeah, which was, great.
That's it? Great.
That's all I got.
That's all you
That's
got?
plenty, that was good.
Super. Any other questions on facilities master plan?
And can I just say one thing about the
Yeah.
first conversations? So, I mean, any board member is welcome to, sign up. What I might end up having to do though, is if the slots are getting close for that particular one that you've signed up for, ask you to pick another one so that we don't take away from, if that's okay. So just a heads up around that. So far, obviously, that's not a problem. But,
What's your maximum?
the host sets the maximum.
Oh.
Most of them are at 25
Wow.
or bigger, with the exception of the one that we're moving to October.
Yeah.
And then I've gotten several requests to, when we move to Zoom, to schedule for them too. So.
Super. All right. Anything else on, you're good? You're good, super. Next on the agenda, other, anyone have any others to other? No? Super. All right, so now, Peter, we're moving to.
Yeah, I promise it'll be quick, but we do need just a short executive session to talk about negotiations. So I'll move that we go into executive session to discuss negotiations.
So moved. Second. Great, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
5 minutes to reset.
Yep.